My phone buzzed on that cold Tuesday morning 3 weeks before Christmas. Mom's name lit up the screen and I answered with my usual cheerful greeting. But her voice was different, distant and rehearsed like she'd practiced this conversation. She told me that Gerald, her boyfriend of 8 months, thought the family would have a more intimate Christmas without me this year. Then came the words that hit like ice water. "No one needs you to come this Christmas." I stayed calm and replied, "Cool. Well, everything will be canceled then." The silence stretched endlessly before her voice trembled, asking what I meant. "You'll figure it out," I said and hung up. I set my phone down and stared out the window of my construction office, watching snowflakes dust the equipment yard. 5 years. 5 years since I bought Morrison Construction at 32 and turned it into the most respected building company in our county. 5 years of Christmas mornings filled with family laughter at what they believed was a magical coincidence of perfect holiday celebrations. The truth was simpler and more expensive than they imagined. Every single Christmas detail flowed through my carefully constructed web of generosity. The stunning lakeside venue where we gathered each year I owned Clearwater Lodge, through my business LLC purchasing the property specifically because it offered breathtaking views of frozen Lake Michigan and enough space for our expanding family. My relatives believed it belonged to my cousin Maria, who was actually my office manager, and posed as the venue coordinator whenever family members called with questions. The incredible spread of food that appeared each Christmas morning I contracted with Robert Chen at Rosemary's Fine Dining 11 months in advance, requesting the same menu that made everyone rave about our potluck contributions. Honey glazed ham that melted off the bone truffle mashed potatoes that Christina always claimed were Dana's recipe cranberry sauce, with orange zest that Christine took credit for mastering. Robert's team arrived before dawn on Christmas morning, setting up the feast while the family slept in their hotel rooms. Those hotel rooms represented another invisible expense. Every December 23rd, I reserved the entire third floor of the Heritage Inn for relatives traveling from Ohio, Indiana, and downstate Michigan. Aunt Helen with her husband Paul and their twin boys, Uncle Richard with his wife Susan, and their teenage daughter Emma, my father's brother Thomas, who drove up from Indianapolis with his son David's family. 16 people, total, thinking various family members split accommodation costs when the reality was a single credit card charge hitting my business account. The gifts that made Christmas magical for my 3 nephews and 2 nieces, I spent hours researching their interests, coordinating with their parents through carefully worded text messages that never revealed my identity as the purchaser. Tyler's gaming laptop, Jessica's art supplies, Brandon's basketball equipment, Sarah's music keyboard, and little Emma's dollhouse with handcrafted furniture. Cash envelopes containing generous amounts that made their parents' eyes water with gratitude, thinking Uncle Justice was simply being kind, rather than funding their children's Christmas dreams. The decorations that transformed Clearwater Lodge into a winter wonderland, I employed a seasonal team from Madison Florals, who spent 2 days creating the magic. Fresh evergreen garland draped along every banister, thousands of twinkling lights wrapped around massive oak beams and centerpieces, featuring white roses nestled among pine branches and burgundy ribbon. The 12-foot Douglas fir that dominated the great room, decorated with ornaments collected over generations, hauled from my personal storage unit, where I preserved each family heirloom with museum-quality care. I created this elaborate illusion, deliberately wanting to provide for my family without seeming like I was showing off my business success. Growing up poor in a single-wide trailer, I understood how money could create uncomfortable dynamics. When Morrison Construction began generating serious revenue, I chose to hide my generosity behind a network of fictional contributors and convenient coincidences. But Gerald changed everything. Patricia's boyfriend of 8 months had systematically poisoned her perception of me with subtle comments and strategic observations. Gerald called me entitled for offering financial advice when Christina's husband Mark mentioned struggling with their mortgage. Gerald suggested I was condescending when I recommended a reliable accountant to Dana after she complained about tax preparation costs. Gerald positioned me as someone who thought he was superior to the family because of business success, despite my careful efforts to downplay financial achievements. Over those 8 months, Gerald presented himself as the family's new protector and provider. He attended Sunday dinners at Patricia's small ranch house, bringing grocery store flowers and generic wine, while positioning these modest gestures as evidence of his caring nature. He listened sympathetically when family members shared financial concerns, offering emotional support, while subtly suggesting that Justice's practical solutions revealed arrogance rather than helpfulness. Gerald became unemployed shortly after meeting Patricia, but presented this as an opportunity to focus entirely on their relationship and family connections. He spent his days at Patricia's house, gradually moving his possessions into her spare bedroom while claiming he was between apartments. He accompanied Patricia to church grocery shopping and family gatherings, always positioning himself as her devoted companion, while making pointed observations about other family members' perceived shortcomings. My phone rang constantly that Tuesday afternoon, but I ignored every call. Instead, I contacted Maria at the office and instructed her to begin the cancellation process. First call went to myself as the owner of Clearwater Lodge, officially releasing the December 25th reservation. Second call went to Robert at Rosemary's Fine Dining, explaining that Christmas catering would not be needed this year. During that second conversation, Robert shared interesting information. A man named Gerald had called their business 3 times in recent weeks, attempting to book Christmas catering and venue services. Gerald claimed to be organizing a family celebration as a surprise, insisting he deserved discounts because he was associated with Justice Morrison's successful construction company. Robert had declined these requests, explaining that their Christmas schedule was fully booked and their services required significant advance planning. Gerald had grown increasingly frustrated during these calls, demanding to speak with managers and insisting that his business partnership with Justice Morrison should guarantee accommodation. Robert's staff documented these conversations because Gerald's aggressive tone and unrealistic demands raised concerns about his credibility. The man claiming to be Justice's business partner could not provide basic information about Morrison Construction's services client base or current projects. As Maria and I worked through cancellation procedures, a disturbing pattern emerged. Gerald had been contacting vendors throughout our county, presenting himself as my business associate while attempting to secure services and discounts. He approached Madison Florals, claiming to be coordinating Christmas decorations on my behalf, Heritage Inn, insisting he was authorized to make reservations for Morrison construction events, and even my accountant's office attempting to gather information about my business finances. The picture became crystal clear. Gerald was not simply Patricia's unemployed boyfriend seeking acceptance from her family. He was a calculating individual who had researched my business success, identified me as the primary financial obstacle to accessing Patricia's resources, and developed a systematic plan to eliminate my influence, while positioning himself as the family's new provider and decision-maker. That evening, I sat in my empty office as snow continued falling outside. $15,000. That's what Christmas cost me annually, money I gladly spent because family meant everything. But Gerald had transformed my generosity into a weapon against me, convincing Patricia that her successful son was somehow the problem rather than the solution. Tomorrow would begin the unraveling of everything Gerald believed he understood about my family dynamics and financial resources. He wanted Christmas without justice. He was about to discover exactly what Christmas without justice actually meant. Wednesday morning brought chaos in the form of frantic phone calls that I continued ignoring while drinking coffee in my kitchen. My call log showed 17 missed calls from Patricia, 12 from Dana, 8 from Christine, and surprisingly 3 from my 16-year-old nephew Tyler. The voicemails painted a picture of growing panic as my family slowly realized that Christmas preparations they had always taken for granted were mysteriously evaporating. Patricia's first voicemail was angry and demanding. "Justice Morrison, you call me back this instant? I don't know what kind of childish game you're playing, but your sisters are asking questions I can't answer about Christmas arrangements. Gerald is handling everything now, so whatever you think you're proving, it's not necessary." By her fifth message recorded around noon, Patricia's tone had shifted to confusion and concern. "Honey, Dana called the place where we always have Christmas, and they said there's no reservation this year. Christine can't reach whoever usually handles the food situation. I think there might be some kind of mix-up. Gerald is making calls, but he's having trouble reaching the right people. Can you please call me back so we can figure this out together?" Gerald's confidence was cracking faster than anyone anticipated. Patricia had assured him that Justice merely showed up on Christmas morning, like everyone else, contributing his presence, rather than any significant planning or financial resources. Gerald assumed that Christmas arrangements happened through some combination of family members pooling efforts, with Justice playing a minimal role that could easily be replaced. Gerald spent Wednesday morning making increasingly desperate phone calls, trying to book venues and services for December 25th. His first shock came when Clearwater Lodge's reservation system showed no availability for Christmas Day, with the representative explaining that their holiday bookings were confirmed months in advance and cost significantly more than Gerald could afford on his non-existent income. Rosemary's Fine Dining delivered another devastating blow when Gerald called demanding catering services for 20 people on Christmas Day. The receptionist politely explained that holiday catering required a minimum of 8 weeks advance notice and deposits ranging from $2,000 to $4,000 depending on menu selection. Gerald hung up when asked for credit card information to secure a booking. Meanwhile, my sisters were conducting their own investigations with growing alarm. Dana called Christine Wednesday afternoon, comparing notes about their usual Christmas contributions. Dana realized she had never actually purchased or prepared cranberry sauce despite family members always complimenting her recipe. Christine discovered that she had never coordinated with hotels about accommodating out-of-town relatives, even though she had assumed responsibility for these arrangements existed somewhere in the family planning process. The revelation struck them simultaneously. They had been living in a carefully maintained fiction where Christmas magically organized itself through invisible hands and mysterious coordination. Neither sister could identify who actually handled reservations, catering decorations, accommodations, or the substantial gift expenses that made their children's Christmas wishes come true year after year. Tyler accidentally accelerated the discovery process through social media carelessness. Wednesday evening, he posted in the family group chat, "Why is everyone freaking out about Christmas? Uncle Justice always pays for everything anyway. He's got that construction company money, and he loves making Christmas special for everyone. Can't we just ask him to fix whatever's broken?" Tyler's innocent message detonated like a bomb in the family group chat. Dana screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Christine with a single word, "What?" Christine called Dana immediately, and they spent 2 hours on the phone piecing together 5 years of evidence they had been too polite or too comfortable to examine closely. The luxury vacation rental that none of them could afford individually. The professional quality catering that appeared without any family member claiming responsibility for coordination or payment. The hotel reservations that somehow never required their credit card information. The elaborate decorations that materialized overnight without any visible effort from family members. The generous gift budget that exceeded what any single family could reasonably spend. Christine's husband, Mark, a financial advisor, brought professional expertise to their investigation. Mark had always wondered about the economics of their Christmas celebrations, estimating that the annual cost probably approached $12,000 to $15,000. Mark assumed that Justice contributed significantly, but had never questioned the specific arrangements because discussing money felt inappropriate during family gatherings. Wednesday night, Mark spent 3 hours making discreet inquiries through his professional network. His insurance agent confirmed that Clearwater Lodge was owned by Morrison Construction LLC. His banking contacts revealed that Justice had been writing off substantial Christmas entertainment expenses through his business for several years. Mark's accountant friend mentioned that Justice's yearly charitable contributions included significant amounts categorized as family support and community events. The financial picture became undeniably clear. Justice had been funding the entire Christmas celebration for 5 years, using his business resources to provide luxury experiences, while allowing family members to maintain their pride by assuming they were contributing equally to shared expenses. Justice had deliberately created an illusion of group effort to avoid making anyone feel uncomfortable about economic disparities within the family. Thursday morning brought devastating news from an unexpected source. Brandon Christine's 12-year-old son called his Aunt Dana with information that sent chills through the family network. Brandon had been staying overnight at Patricia's house Tuesday evening when Gerald received a phone call that the boy overheard from the guest bathroom. Gerald had been speaking to someone about marriage proposals and relocation plans. Brandon heard Gerald discussing timeline details about proposing to Patricia during Christmas celebrations, followed by immediate plans to sell Patricia's house and move to Florida, where Gerald claimed to have family connections and business opportunities. Gerald specifically mentioned that Justice represented the primary obstacle to these plans because Justice held too much influence over Patricia's decision-making process. The most disturbing detail involved Gerald's assessment of Patricia's financial assets. Gerald told his phone contact that Patricia owned her house, outright maintained substantial retirement savings from 30 years of nursing work, and received monthly pension payments that would continue for life. Gerald described these resources as adequate to support both of them comfortably in Florida, especially after liquidating Patricia's Michigan property and possessions. Brandon's revelation transformed family concern into active alarm. Gerald was not simply an unemployed boyfriend seeking acceptance or financial support. Gerald was executing a systematic plan to isolate Patricia from her family support system, access her accumulated wealth, and relocate beyond the reach of relatives who might question his motives or financial management. Dana called an emergency family conference call Thursday evening, including Christine, Mark, and Tyler, while specifically excluding Patricia. They needed to discuss Brandon's information and coordinate their response without alerting Gerald to their growing suspicions about his long-term intentions. The conversation lasted 90 minutes and concluded with unanimous agreement. They needed Justice's help immediately. Whatever pride or confusion had contributed to Patricia's decision to exclude Justice from Christmas, the family now faced a much more serious threat than hurt feelings or holiday planning disputes. Dana volunteered to call Justice and ask him to join their emergency family discussion. But when she dialed his number, the call went straight to voicemail. Justice Morrison was not answering his phone, and Christmas was 13 days away. Friday morning marked the beginning of what I privately called Operation Reality Check. Maria arrived at the office carrying a comprehensive spreadsheet documenting 5 years of Christmas expenses, vendor contacts, and cancellation procedures. We had work to do, and Gerald's web of deception was about to collapse under the weight of his own overconfidence. The first domino fell when Madison Florals called to confirm our Christmas decoration cancellation. Jennifer, their lead designer, mentioned that a man claiming to be my business partner had visited their showroom Thursday afternoon demanding access to our usual holiday arrangements. Gerald had become aggressive when Jennifer explained that their Christmas schedule was fully booked and their premium decorating services required advance contracts with substantial deposits. Gerald had insisted that his partnership with Justice Morrison entitled him to immediate accommodation and special pricing. Jennifer asked Gerald to provide basic information about Morrison Construction's current projects to verify his claims. Gerald could not identify any of our active job sites, current clients, or business services. Jennifer's team documented this interaction because Gerald's behavior raised security concerns about potential fraud attempts. The second domino fell at Heritage Inn when their reservations manager called to discuss our Christmas booking cancellation. Sarah from their events team reported that Gerald had appeared at their front desk Thursday morning, claiming authority to modify our family's hotel reservations. Gerald could not provide confirmation numbers, guest names, or payment information associated with our booking. When Sarah requested identification and authorization documentation, Gerald became hostile and accused the hotel staff of deliberately sabotaging his Christmas plans. Hotel security eventually escorted Gerald from the premises after he began shouting about discrimination and threatening legal action. Sarah's report noted that Gerald claimed to be organizing Christmas accommodations as a surprise for his future wife, but could not provide any verifiable information connecting him to our long-standing reservation or payment history. Robert from Rosemary's Fine Dining delivered the most revealing information when he called to discuss catering cancellation details. Gerald had contacted their business 6 times since Tuesday, escalating from polite inquiries to desperate demands for last-minute Christmas catering services. Thursday afternoon, Gerald arrived at their restaurant unannounced, claiming to be my authorized representative and demanding immediate access to our usual Christmas menu arrangements. Robert showed Gerald their catering contracts and pricing information, explaining that their Christmas Day services cost between $4,000 and $6,000 depending on guest count and menu selections. Gerald requested their least expensive options, asked about payment plans, and inquired whether any services could be provided without upfront deposits. When Robert requested business credentials or authorization letters from Morrison Construction, Gerald produced a business card identifying himself as a project coordinator for my company. Robert immediately recognized this as fraudulent because Morrison Construction does not employ project coordinators, and Gerald could not answer elementary questions about our business operations staff or current contracts. Most disturbing was Gerald's growing desperation. Robert reported that Gerald had begged for any available catering services, offering to pay with checks drawn on Patricia's bank account. Gerald explained that his elderly girlfriend maintained substantial savings and trusted him to handle financial arrangements for family celebrations. Gerald requested catering services worth several $1,000s, while admitting he personally had no income or credit available. Friday afternoon brought the breakthrough I had been methodically building toward. Maria's investigation into Gerald's background had uncovered public records revealing a marriage license issued in Hillsborough County, Florida, 18 months ago. Gerald Thompson was legally married to Sandra K. Thompson, with their address listed as an apartment complex in Tampa. Further investigation through my construction industry network revealed that Gerald had worked intermittently for roofing companies throughout Florida, leaving several positions under circumstances involving missing equipment, unpaid debts, or conflicts with employers. Gerald's employment history showed a pattern of short-term jobs, followed by periods of unemployment, with no indication of the stable career trajectory he had presented to Patricia. Most damaging was information from my friend Marcus, who operates a background screening service for construction companies. Marcus discovered that Gerald Thompson had outstanding arrest warrants in 2 Florida counties related to check fraud and identity theft charges. Gerald had been using aliases and false employment information to access victims' financial resources, typically targeting older women, living alone with accumulated savings or property assets. The picture was becoming crystal clear. Gerald was not Patricia's devoted boyfriend seeking family acceptance. Gerald was a career criminal who had identified Patricia as a lucrative target, researched her family's financial dynamics, and developed a systematic plan to access her assets while eliminating any relatives who might protect her interests or question his motives. Friday evening delivered the final piece of evidence I needed. Tyler called my office, directly bypassing the family's attempts to reach me through Patricia. Tyler's voice trembled as he shared information that confirmed Gerald's criminal intentions and timeline. Tyler had been helping Patricia organize Christmas decorations in her basement Thursday evening when Gerald arrived home from his frustrated vendor meetings. Gerald was obviously angry and began complaining loudly about Christmas arrangements while making phone calls to someone he addressed as baby and sweetheart. Tyler heard Gerald explain to his phone contact that Christmas plans were falling apart because Justice had somehow gained control over vendor relationships and family coordination. Gerald assured this person that Christmas setbacks were temporary, that his marriage proposal would proceed as planned, and that Patricia's relocation to Florida would begin immediately after the holidays. Most revealing was Gerald's assessment of Patricia's financial assets and his timeline for accessing them. Gerald told his contact that Patricia's house was worth approximately $200,000, that her retirement accounts contained nearly $300,000, and that her monthly pension payments totaled over $2,000. Gerald estimated that liquidating Patricia's Michigan assets would provide sufficient resources for them to disappear to Florida before family members could interfere with their plans. Gerald specifically mentioned that Justice represented the primary obstacle to accessing Patricia's wealth, because Justice had too much influence over Patricia's financial decisions and too much knowledge about family dynamics. Gerald's original plan had been to gradually isolate Patricia from family influences, particularly Justice, before proposing marriage and suggesting relocation for health and lifestyle benefits. Tyler's revelation confirmed that Gerald was not simply a con man seeking temporary financial benefits. Gerald was planning to marry Patricia, liquidate her accumulated life savings, relocate beyond family protection, and potentially abandon her once her resources were depleted. Patricia was not Gerald's girlfriend. Patricia was Gerald's next victim in what appeared to be a long-term pattern of targeting vulnerable older women for financial exploitation. Saturday morning, I finally returned Dana's calls. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with anxiety and relief. "Justice, thank God. We need to talk about Gerald immediately. We've discovered some very disturbing information, and we think Mom might be in serious danger." "I know exactly who Gerald is," I replied calmly. "And you're right about the danger. But before we discuss Gerald, we need to talk about Christmas. Do you and Christine understand why everything is canceled this year?" The silence stretched for several seconds before Dana's voice broke with emotion. "Justice, we had no idea. Tyler told us you've been paying for everything, and Mark confirmed it through his business contacts. We feel terrible about how Mom treated you, and we're scared about what Gerald might be planning. Can you please help us figure out how to protect her?" "Christmas isn't canceled," I said. "Christmas is just moving to a different location with a very different guest list. And Gerald is about to discover that some mistakes have permanent consequences." Sunday morning brought the phone call I had been waiting for. Patricia's voice was strained and hollow when she spoke my name, lacking the confident authority that had characterized our previous conversation. Gerald sat beside her at the kitchen table, coaching her responses, while I listened to the carefully rehearsed questions about Christmas arrangements and family obligations. "Justice, honey, I'm calling because the girls are very upset about Christmas plans this year. Dana and Christine think there might be some kind of misunderstanding about who was handling what arrangements. Gerald has been working very hard to organize everything, but he's having difficulty reaching the right people to coordinate our usual celebration." I let the silence stretch uncomfortably before responding with deliberate calm. "Mom, there's no misunderstanding. You told me that no one needs me to come to Christmas this year. I simply took you at your word and canceled my involvement in Christmas arrangements." "Your involvement?" Patricia's voice carried confusion and growing alarm. "What exactly does that mean, Justice? What kind of involvement were you talking about?" "Mom, I've been paying for Christmas for 5 years. The venue, the catering, the hotel rooms, the decorations, most of the gifts. Everything you thought was being handled by various family members was actually being coordinated and funded through my business. When you decided the family would be better off without me, I canceled those arrangements." The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds. I could hear Gerald's voice in the background, urgent and demanding, but Patricia's response came slowly and uncertainly. "Justice, I don't understand. Gerald said that you just show up on Christmas morning like everyone else. He said that families always work together to make holidays happen, and that you were being dramatic about not being invited this year. Are you saying that you were actually organizing everything? Mom Clearwater Lodge, where we celebrate Christmas every year, I own that property through my business. The incredible food that everyone thinks is potluck contributions, that's catering from Rosemary's Fine Dining that costs $4,000 annually. The hotel rooms for our out-of-town relatives I book and pay for the entire third floor at Heritage Inn. The decorations that make everything magical. Madison Florals charges $3,000 to transform the lodge each Christmas. Patricia's breathing became audible and irregular. Gerald's coaching voice grew more insistent in the background, but Patricia continued asking questions with mounting horror. The gifts for the grandchildren, the beautiful Christmas tree, the flowers and candles, and everything that makes Christmas so special for our family. Everything, Mom. $15,000 every year for 5 years. I created an illusion where you thought Christmas just happened through family cooperation, because I wanted everyone to feel good about contributing rather than feeling like they owed me anything. I never wanted credit or recognition. I just wanted our family to have beautiful memories. The phone call ended abruptly, and I knew that Gerald was attempting damage control, while Patricia processed the devastating realization that her decision to exclude Justice had eliminated Christmas entirely for her family. Within 2 hours, my phone began ringing with calls from distraught family members who Patricia had contacted in growing panic. Each conversation revealed how Gerald's careful manipulation had completely misrepresented the family dynamics and Christmas arrangements to Patricia while positioning himself as a reasonable alternative to Justice's supposed arrogance. Christine called first, sobbing through her apology. Justice, Mom just told us that you've been paying for everything all these years. We had no idea. We thought Christmas just worked out somehow through everyone contributing different things. Gerald convinced Mom that you were trying to control the family with money, but really you were just trying to take care of everyone without making us feel bad about accepting help. Dana's call came an hour later, equally emotional and apologetic. We've been taking advantage of your generosity for 5 years without even realizing it. Mom said Gerald told her that you thought you were better than the rest of us because you have money. But that's not who you are at all. You've been hiding how much you contribute so we wouldn't feel uncomfortable or indebted. Gerald twisted your kindness into something ugly. Tyler called me directly that afternoon, his teenage voice shaking with anger and confusion. Uncle Justice, Grandma Patricia is crying, and Gerald is shouting at her about Christmas being ruined. He keeps saying that you're being petty and manipulative, but I told them that you always take care of everyone. Gerald got really mad when I said that, and he told me to stay out of adult conversations. But I know you're not the bad guy here. The family conference call that evening included everyone except Patricia and Gerald. Dana, Christine, Mark, Tyler, Jessica, Brandon, Sarah, and even little Emma joined the conversation to discuss the crisis threatening their family unity and Patricia's safety. Mark, speaking as the family's financial advisor, provided the economic reality check that everyone needed to hear. Justice has been subsidizing our entire Christmas celebration for 5 years. $15,000 annually totals $75,000 that Justice has spent on family gatherings without asking for recognition or reimbursement. We've been living in a fantasy where Christmas magically organized itself. Christine added the emotional perspective that crystallized everyone's feelings. Gerald didn't just convince Mom to uninvite Justice from Christmas. Gerald convinced Mom that Justice was the problem when Justice was actually the solution to everything. Gerald turned Justice's generosity into evidence of arrogance, when really Justice was protecting our feelings by hiding how much he contributes. The most disturbing revelation came from Brandon, whose 12-year-old perspective cut through adult complexities with frightening clarity. I heard Gerald talking on the phone about marrying Grandma Patricia and moving her to Florida. He said that Uncle Justice was causing problems, But once they got married and moved away, Uncle Justice couldn't interfere with their life anymore. Gerald was planning to get Grandma Patricia away from all of us. Tyler supplemented Brandon's information with additional details that confirmed Gerald's predatory timeline. Gerald has been telling Grandma Patricia that family is just causing her stress and that they would be happier living somewhere warm where they could focus on their relationship. Gerald keeps saying that other people have too many opinions about their business and that Florida would give them privacy to build their life together. The conversation concluded with unanimous family agreement. Gerald represented an immediate threat to Patricia's safety and financial security, and Justice remained their best hope for protecting their mother and grandmother from a dangerous predator who had successfully manipulated her into isolation from her protective family network. Dana volunteered to approach Patricia directly with the family's concerns about Gerald's background and motives. Christine agreed to research Gerald's history through her connections in the healthcare community, where Patricia had worked for 30 years. Mark offered to investigate Gerald's financial status and legal standing through his professional networks. But first, they needed Justice's help with the immediate crisis. Christmas was 8 days away. Patricia was emotionally devastated by the revelation of Justice's hidden generosity, and Gerald was becoming increasingly desperate as his plans collapsed around his criminal intentions. Justice. Dana said quietly, "We know we don't deserve to ask for your help after what happened, but Mom is in danger and Gerald is getting more aggressive as Christmas approaches. Can you forgive us and help us save her?" "Christmas isn't canceled," I replied. "Christmas is just beginning for our family, but Gerald's Christmas is definitely going to be very different from what he's expecting." Monday morning delivered the breakthrough that would destroy Gerald's carefully constructed deception forever. Sandra K. Thompson called Morrison Construction directly asking to speak with someone regarding her husband Gerald Thompson's fraudulent use of my business name in attempts to secure Christmas services throughout our county. Maria transferred the call to my office where Sandra's Florida accent carried both determination and exhaustion as she explained 18 months of tracking Gerald's systematic fraud patterns across multiple states. Sandra was not simply Gerald's abandoned wife. Sandra was a retired fraud investigator for the Florida Department of Financial Services who had been building a criminal case against Gerald while he targeted vulnerable women in Michigan. Mr. Morrison Gerald has been using your business reputation to gain credibility with vendors while presenting himself as your business partner or authorized representative. I've documented similar patterns in Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina, where Gerald researched successful local businesses and used their names to facilitate his confidence schemes targeting elderly women with accumulated assets. Sandra's investigation revealed Gerald's comprehensive method for identifying and exploiting victims. Gerald used social media and public records to research families with successful members, particularly adult children, with established businesses who might support elderly parents financially. Gerald sought women who owned property, maintained retirement savings, and lived independently with minimal daily supervision from protective relatives. Gerald's pattern involves inserting himself into these women's lives as a romantic partner while systematically poisoning their relationships with family members who might recognize his intentions or protect their financial interests. Gerald identifies the family member who represents the greatest threat to his plans, typically someone with business knowledge or financial resources, and works to eliminate their influence through manipulation and isolation tactics. Most chilling was Sandra's explanation of Gerald's long-term strategy for accessing victims' assets. Gerald doesn't steal money directly because that creates immediate evidence of criminal activity. Instead, Gerald manipulates victims into making voluntary financial decisions that transfer assets into his control. Gerald convinces victims to add his name to bank accounts, change beneficiaries on insurance policies, grant power of attorney for financial decisions, or relocate to areas where he can control their access to legal and family support systems. Sandra had been tracking Gerald's movements through credit monitoring services and public record searches. Gerald had established a pattern of staying with victims for 8 to 18 months while gradually accessing their financial resources before disappearing to target new victims in different states. Sandra estimated that Gerald had stolen over $400,000 from elderly women during the past 5 years. Mr. Morrison, your mother Patricia, represents Gerald's most ambitious target because your family's financial resources and business success created the impression that significant assets were available for exploitation. Gerald researched your construction company and estimated that your family maintained substantial wealth that could be accessed through Patricia's cooperation and your elimination from family decision-making processes. Sandra's most devastating revelation involved Gerald's immediate plans for Patricia. Gerald has been communicating with associates in Florida about marriage and relocation timelines. Gerald believes that marrying Patricia and moving her to Florida will provide legal protection for accessing her assets while placing her beyond reach of family members who might question his financial management or recognize signs of exploitation. Sandra had documentation proving that Gerald maintained active relationships with other women in Florida while pursuing Patricia in Michigan. Gerald's phone records showed regular contact with 2 additional elderly women who believed Gerald was their devoted boyfriend preparing to relocate permanently to their areas. Gerald was simultaneously planning marriages to multiple victims while maintaining his legal marriage to Sandra. The evidence Sandra provided included photographs, recorded phone conversations, financial records, and law enforcement reports from multiple states where Gerald had committed similar crimes. Sandra had been working with federal authorities to build a comprehensive criminal case that would result in serious prison time for Gerald's systematic elder abuse and fraud activities. Mr. Morrison, I need your cooperation to document Gerald's activities in Michigan. Federal prosecutors require evidence that Gerald used interstate communications and transportation to facilitate his fraud schemes. Gerald's attempts to use your business name and reputation provide crucial documentation of his methods and criminal intent. That afternoon, I called Dana and Christine to arrange an emergency family meeting that would include Sandra's participation via conference call. Tuesday evening, my sisters arrived at my office with fear and determination etched across their faces as Sandra shared her comprehensive investigation into Gerald's criminal background and methods. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Gerald Thompson was a career predator who had systematically targeted elderly women across multiple states, stealing their accumulated life savings while destroying their relationships with protective family members. Patricia was not Gerald's girlfriend. Patricia was Gerald's carefully selected victim in a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Sandra's final bombshell involved Gerald's timeline for completing his exploitation of Patricia. Gerald has scheduled vacation time from his fictional employment to spend Christmas week finalizing his marriage proposal and relocation preparations. Gerald plans to propose marriage during Christmas celebrations, convince Patricia to elope immediately afterward, and relocate to Florida before family members can interfere with his plans or access to Patricia's financial resources. Christine broke down crying as the full scope of Gerald's manipulation became clear. Gerald had not simply convinced Patricia to exclude justice from Christmas. Gerald had orchestrated Patricia's isolation from her most financially capable and protective family member as preparation for criminal exploitation that would destroy her accumulated life savings and emotional security. Dana's response was immediate and decisive. We have to tell Mom everything immediately. She needs to understand that Gerald is not who she thinks he is, and that she's in immediate danger from someone who's planning to steal everything she's worked for her entire life. Sandra's advice was more strategic. Confronting Patricia directly will cause Gerald to accelerate his timeline and potentially become dangerous. Gerald has been psychologically manipulating Patricia for months, and she may initially refuse to believe evidence that contradicts the emotional investment she's made in their relationship. We need to approach Patricia when Gerald is not present provide her with comprehensive evidence, and ensure that law enforcement is prepared to intervene if Gerald becomes threatening. The plan we developed was both simple and devastating. Wednesday morning, Dana and Christine would invite Patricia to lunch at a restaurant where Gerald could not overhear their conversation. They would present Sandra's evidence, systematically focusing on documented facts rather than emotional appeals. Sandra would join the conversation by phone to answer Patricia's questions and provide law enforcement contact information. Meanwhile, I would coordinate with local police and federal authorities to ensure Gerald's arrest on outstanding Florida warrants while providing Michigan evidence of his fraud attempts and threats to Patricia's safety. Gerald's criminal Christmas was about to become very real, and his predatory targeting of my mother was about to result in serious consequences that would protect Patricia and other potential victims from future exploitation. Wednesday would mark the beginning of the end for Gerald Thompson's criminal career and the restoration of my family's trust, safety, and Christmas traditions. Wednesday morning unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice and revelation. Sandra arrived at Detroit Metropolitan Airport on the 6:30 flight from Tampa, carrying documentation that would destroy Gerald's predatory scheme forever. Maria picked Sandra up at baggage claim and drove her directly to my office, where we spent 2 hours reviewing evidence and coordinating timing with local authorities. Sandra was not what I had expected. 62 years old with silver hair and intelligent blue eyes, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades investigating criminal behavior and protecting vulnerable victims. Her manila folder contained photographs, financial records, police reports, and recorded phone conversations that painted a comprehensive picture of Gerald's systematic elder abuse activities. Mr. Morrison, I want you to understand that your mother, Patricia, is not naive or foolish for trusting Gerald. Gerald is a sophisticated predator who studies his victims carefully and uses psychological manipulation techniques to overcome their natural defenses. Patricia's kindness and openness made her an ideal target for someone who specializes in exploiting those exact qualities. Sandra's strategy for confronting Gerald involved timing and surprise that would prevent him from fleeing before law enforcement could intervene. Dana and Christine were taking Patricia to lunch at Romano's Italian Bistro, a quiet restaurant, where they could present evidence without interruption. Sandra and I would arrive at Patricia's house at precisely 1:30, when Gerald would be alone and unprepared for confrontation. Detective Rachel Chen from our county sheriff's department had reviewed Sandra's evidence and confirmed that Michigan authorities could arrest Gerald on outstanding Florida warrants while developing additional charges related to his fraud attempts and threats against Patricia's financial security. 2 patrol units would be stationed near Patricia's house to intervene immediately if Gerald became dangerous or attempted to flee. At 1:15, Sandra and I parked across the street from Patricia's small ranch house, watching Gerald's rusted pickup truck in the driveway while reviewing our approach one final time. Sandra carried her investigative credentials and comprehensive documentation, while I carried 5 years of Christmas expense records that proved Gerald's systematic deception about family finances and arrangements. Gerald answered the door wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, his appearance reflecting the stress of watching his Christmas plans collapse around his criminal intentions. His expression shifted from surprise to alarm when Sandra introduced herself as Mrs. Gerald Thompson and presented her marriage certificate as proof of their legal relationship. "Gerald, honey, we need to talk about your Michigan girlfriend and your plans to commit bigamy while stealing her life savings. I've been documenting your activities for law enforcement, and this Christmas is going to be very different from what you were expecting." Gerald's reaction was immediate and revealing. Rather than expressing shock or confusion about Sandra's presence, Gerald became angry and defensive, demanding to know how Sandra had located him and threatening to call police about harassment and trespassing. Gerald's response confirmed his awareness of his criminal activities and his fear of legal consequences. I stepped forward with my own evidence, presenting Gerald with financial records documenting his attempts to use Morrison Construction's business name fraudulently while pursuing Christmas services he could not afford. Gerald, you've been telling vendors throughout this county that you're my business partner while attempting to access services and discounts using my company's reputation. That's criminal fraud, and it's documented by multiple businesses where you've made these false claims. Gerald's facade collapsed completely as he realized the scope of evidence assembled against his criminal activities. Sandra presented her investigative documentation systematically, including photographs of Gerald with other women, recorded phone conversations discussing marriage and relocation plans, and financial records showing his pattern of accessing victims' assets before disappearing to target new individuals. The most devastating evidence involved Gerald's communications with associates in Florida about Patricia's financial resources and timeline for exploitation. Sandra played recorded phone conversations where Gerald discussed Patricia's house value retirement savings and monthly pension payments while planning marriage and relocation strategies that would provide access to these assets. Gerald attempted to flee when Sandra presented arrest warrants from Florida counties where he faced charges for check fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Detective Chen and her partner intercepted Gerald at his truck, handcuffing him while reading Miranda rights as neighborhood residents watched from their windows and doorways. Sandra's final confrontation with Gerald occurred as officers placed him in the patrol car. Gerald, you picked the wrong family this time. Patricia has children who love her enough to investigate your background and protect her from predators like you. Your criminal career is over, and every elderly woman you've targeted deserves to know that justice has finally caught up with your predatory behavior. Gerald's arrest created immediate chaos and confusion that required careful management to protect Patricia's emotional stability. Dana called from Romano's to report that Patricia had become hysterical after reviewing Sandra's evidence, alternating between disbelief, horror, and devastation, as she realized the extent of Gerald's manipulation and criminal intent. Patricia's reaction included guilt and self-blame that required immediate therapeutic support. She blamed herself for being foolish enough to trust Gerald, for allowing him to poison her relationships with family members, and for endangering her financial security through naive romantic attachment to a career criminal. Patricia's emotional devastation was as serious as the financial threat Gerald had represented. Sandra's experience with elder abuse victims provided crucial guidance for supporting Patricia through the crisis. Patricia needs to understand that Gerald's success in manipulating her demonstrates his criminal sophistication rather than her personal failings. Gerald studied Patricia carefully and used psychological techniques designed to overcome normal skepticism and protective instincts. Patricia was targeted specifically because of her positive qualities, not because of any personal weaknesses. The afternoon concluded with Patricia returning to her house, accompanied by Dana, Christine, Sandra, and myself. Patricia needed to see Gerald's arrest and understand that the threat to her safety and security had been eliminated permanently. Patricia also needed to hear apologies and reassurances from family members who had allowed Gerald's manipulation to damage their relationships with their protective and generous brother. Patricia's first words to me were broken and heartfelt. "Justice, I'm so sorry. Gerald convinced me that you were trying to control our family with money, but really you were just trying to take care of everyone without making us feel bad about needing help. I almost lost my children because I listened to someone who was planning to steal everything I worked for my entire life." Sandra spent that evening with our family, sharing her perspective as both Gerald's legal wife and a professional fraud investigator. Sandra helped Patricia understand that recovery from predatory manipulation required time therapy and support rather than self-criticism and isolation. Sandra also provided Patricia with resources for protecting her financial assets and recognizing manipulation tactics that future predators might attempt. Thursday morning brought news that Gerald had waived his right to fight extradition, and would be transferred to Florida to face multiple felony charges related to his systematic elder abuse activities. Gerald's criminal Christmas was ending with arrest prosecution and prison time that would protect Patricia and countless other potential victims from future exploitation. Christmas was 6 days away, and my family was ready to celebrate together with gratitude, understanding, and appreciation for protective love that sometimes requires difficult choices and uncomfortable revelations. The morning of December 19th brought a phone call that would restore not just Christmas, but the foundation of trust and understanding our family had been missing for 5 long years. Patricia's voice carried a humility and gratitude I had never heard before when she spoke my name with trembling emotion. "Justice, honey, I need to say some things to you, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about everything that happened with Gerald, everything Sandra told us about his criminal background, and everything I said to you that was so hurtful and wrong." Patricia continued with words that came from deep personal reflection rather than coached responses or external pressure. "I realize now that Gerald didn't just convince me to exclude you from Christmas. Gerald convinced me that your generosity was actually selfishness, that your success was actually arrogance, and that your protection was actually control. Gerald turned all of your positive qualities into negative characteristics because he needed to eliminate your influence over my decisions." The conversation lasted 47 minutes, with Patricia taking full responsibility for her poor judgment and expressing genuine understanding of how Gerald's manipulation had nearly destroyed our family relationships while endangering her personal safety and financial security. Patricia had spent considerable time with Sandra learning about predatory manipulation techniques and understanding how sophisticated criminals exploit victims' positive qualities rather than their weaknesses. "Justice, I want you to know that I understand how much you've sacrificed for our family's happiness. $75,000 over 5 years, countless hours of planning and coordination, all done secretly, so we could maintain our pride while enjoying experiences we could never afford individually. You protected our feelings while providing for our needs, and Gerald convinced me that your kindness was somehow evidence of your selfishness." Patricia's apology concluded with a request that demonstrated genuine growth and understanding. "I want to earn back your trust and repair the damage I caused to our family. But first, I need to understand how Christmas arrangements actually work, so I can appreciate what you've been doing for us and possibly contribute in meaningful ways rather than just accepting your generosity without acknowledgement or gratitude." 2 weeks before Christmas, our family gathered at Patricia's small ranch house for what became the most honest and emotionally healing conversation we had ever shared. Dana and Christine joined Patricia in expressing heartfelt apologies and genuine appreciation for sacrifices they had never recognized. Tyler, Jessica, Brandon, Sarah, and Emma listened as their parents and grandmother discussed family financial dynamics with unprecedented transparency and maturity. Mark provided the financial perspective that helped everyone understand the scope of Justice's annual Christmas investment. $15,000 represents approximately 25% of the median annual household income in our state. Justice has been subsidizing Christmas celebrations equivalent to buying each family a reliable used car every year, money that he spent gladly, because family relationships matter more to him than personal financial accumulation. Sandra remained with our family through the week, providing perspective as both a fraud investigation professional and Gerald's legal wife who had experienced similar manipulation tactics. Sandra helped Patricia and the entire family understand that recovering from predatory targeting required ongoing vigilance and support, rather than shame or isolation. The conversation naturally evolved toward Christmas planning that would honor both tradition and newfound understanding. Rather than canceling Christmas entirely or simply restoring previous arrangements, we decided to create new traditions that reflected our family's mature appreciation for Justice's contributions. while encouraging meaningful participation from everyone. I shared my surprise announcement that Christmas had never actually been canceled. During the week of Gerald's manipulation and arrest, I had been quietly preparing alternative arrangements at my own lakeside home, rather than Clearwater Lodge. My property offered similar views and accommodations while providing the privacy and security our family needed after Gerald's criminal activities and arrest. The Christmas setup at my home reflected 5 years of learning what made our celebration special. Professional catering from Rosemary's Fine Dining, stunning decorations from Madison Florals, accommodations for traveling relatives, and generous gifts for the children. But this year included acknowledgement of Justice's planning and financial contributions, rather than maintaining the fiction of mysterious coordination and shared expenses. Dana and Christine insisted on contributing financially to future Christmas celebrations, not as obligation or repayment, but as expressions of gratitude and shared responsibility for family traditions. Mark helped establish a family Christmas fund, where everyone contributed according to their abilities, while Justice continued providing the majority of financial support without shame or secrecy. Christmas morning arrived with snow falling gently over my lakeside property, as our family gathered with deeper appreciation for protective love and generous spirits than we had ever possessed before. Patricia spent considerable time expressing gratitude not just for Christmas arrangements, but for Justice's persistent love despite her temporary rejection of his influence and protection. Tyler created a heartfelt social media post that morning, sharing photos of our Christmas celebration with a caption that read, "Grateful for Uncle Justice, who has been making our family Christmas magical for 5 years, while never asking for credit or recognition." Sometimes the people who love us most show their love through actions rather than words, and sometimes we don't recognize their sacrifices until we almost lose them. Christmas is about family forgiveness and appreciating the people who take care of us, even when we don't deserve their kindness. Tyler's post resonated throughout our community, generating hundreds of responses from people sharing their own stories about family members whose quiet generosity and protection had gone unrecognized for years. Several local businesses contacted Morrison Construction about potential partnerships and projects, recognizing the character and values that Tyler's words revealed about his uncle's approach to family and business relationships. Sandra joined our Christmas celebration as an honored guest and new family friend, sharing her own experience with predatory targeting while helping Patricia understand that recovery from manipulation required ongoing support rather than isolation or shame. Sandra's presence provided Patricia with continued access to professional guidance about recognizing and avoiding future exploitation attempts. The most meaningful moment of Christmas morning occurred when Patricia presented Justice with a handwritten letter expressing 5 years of accumulated gratitude for Christmas memories that had shaped their family's traditions and relationships. Patricia had spent weeks writing and rewriting her thoughts, creating a permanent record of appreciation that Justice would treasure forever. Christmas afternoon brought news that Gerald had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison on multiple elder abuse and fraud charges. Additional charges were pending in several states where other victims had come forward after Sandra's investigation became public knowledge. Gerald's predatory career was permanently ended, and his systematic targeting of vulnerable elderly women would result in serious consequences that protected future potential victims. The week between Christmas and New Year brought family discussions about establishing a foundation to help other elderly individuals recognize and avoid financial predators like Gerald. Patricia volunteered to share her experience as a speaker for educational programs, transforming her painful experience into protection for other potential victims. Sandra decided to relocate permanently to Michigan after divorcing Gerald and liquidating their Florida properties. Sandra's expertise in fraud investigation combined with Patricia's personal experience created a powerful advocacy team for elder abuse prevention and victim support services. The new year brought business opportunities for Morrison Construction, as community members recognized the character and integrity that Tyler's social media post had revealed. Justice's reputation for quiet generosity and family protection translated into professional relationships with clients who valued these qualities in their business partnerships. Most importantly, our family entered the new year with honest communication, mutual appreciation, and protective love that had been strengthened rather than damaged by Gerald's attempted manipulation. We learned that true family security requires transparency about financial contributions, recognition of generous sacrifices, and vigilance against those who would exploit our positive qualities for criminal purposes. The story concludes with a reflection on the powerful lesson that genuine love requires honest transparency, and protecting family sometimes means exposing uncomfortable truths rather than enabling harmful situations to continue. Justice realized that hiding his generosity to avoid appearing superior had actually made his family vulnerable to exploitation by someone who researched their financial dynamics and used that knowledge to manipulate family relationships. True protection requires open communication about financial arrangements, clear acknowledgement of generous contributions, and family unity against those who would divide us for criminal purposes. Christmas became more meaningful when family members understood and appreciated the sacrifices that made their celebrations possible, rather than taking mysterious blessings for granted. Our family's Christmas tradition now includes annual appreciation for Justice's leadership and protection shared financial contributions, according to individual abilities and continued vigilance against those who might target our family's positive qualities for exploitation. We learned that gratitude must be expressed openly, generosity must be acknowledged honestly, and family protection requires truth rather than comfortable fiction. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone tried to manipulate your family relationships or turn you against people who were actually protecting your best interests? Sometimes the people who love us most show their care through actions rather than words, and we might not recognize their sacrifices until we almost lose them. Share your thoughts about how families can better recognize and appreciate the quiet heroes in their lives who provide protection and support without seeking credit or recognition. Thank you for sharing this journey with our family and for understanding that Christmas is ultimately about love, protection, and the courage to stand up against those who would harm the people we care about most. I hope your holidays are filled with appreciation for the people who quietly make your life better, honest communication with those you love, and the wisdom to recognize genuine protection versus manipulation. Please like this story if it reminded you to appreciate the protective people in your life. Subscribe for more stories about family strength and resilience. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for family, and comment below with your own experiences about recognizing and appreciating the quiet heroes who make your life better. May your new year be filled with honest relationships, protective love, and the wisdom to recognize those who truly have your best interests at heart.